In the Persona games, a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei games, a common theme in the games is that you, the protagonist, have to deal with some sort of traitor that comes up in the story. Kind of a little bit. Persona 1 doesn't have a traitor at all. Persona 2 kinda has a traitor, or like a bizarre sleeper agent, though they're actively doing bad things to you, and then they realize that they're the one who's on the wrong side, so they realize, oh, I should probably just do the good thing. Persona 3 has a more traditional use of a traitor. The man in charge of the program that you are a part of tells you to do these things in the needs for the greater good. Whoops! Turns out the dude is in charge of doing the greater bad, so then you must turn on him and fix the things you all fucked up on. Coincidentally, Shuji Akutsuki, the guy who ends up being the traitor in Persona 3, spoiler alerts, was specifically designed in a way that when you saw him, you would be like, wow, that's a guy I don't trust. I don't really know if they succeeded in that manner. I look at him and say, that just looks like a guy. But I guess when you interact with him, he's more of a something fishy's going on. Persona 4 took a different approach, the traitor being someone you form a social link in the game with. Social link is just a mechanic that was just introduced in Persona 3. Quick rundown on what social links are. They are bonds you form with people you meet, whether they be a part of your team or just people outside of your circle of friends and just people you get to know through the story of the game. As your bond grows, what they do for you in terms of passive upgrades or active upgrades like discounts and things becomes more noticeable. And you learn more, and you actually have to help these people grow to be better people sometimes a little bit. Another perk with dealing with your social links is that when you make a persona in that Arcana type, they get an EXP boost. The Arcana types sort of follow the tarot card system in regular real life. I'm not really super familiar with how tarot cards work, and so I don't know if it's more of a theming thing and more like just because they follow the traits that are most likely associated with that tarot card. That's something I can't really speak on. Back to the actual reason of this video. It should be noted though that the social link for Toru Adachi is only present in Persona 4 Golden, which is sort of like a more complete version of traditional or vanilla Persona 4. In vanilla Persona 4, Toru Adachi is just seen as a bumbling partner for your caretaker because they're cops. Really, what Persona 4 teaches us is that all cops are bastards, because as it turns out, Toru Adachi isn't really a boob of a cop that we see him as. He's actually a serial killer. Though in a brilliant sense of storytelling, this is the point, as we usually see serial killers as people we least suspect, or at least that's how the media or their friends and family paint them as. But this video isn't about any of those boys I just mentioned. This is more to facilitate a pattern in these games. Persona 5, and to a greater extent Persona 5 Royal, really push what traitors you deal with in the game to its max. You have to deal with 2 and or 3, depending on the game you play, traitors in which twists and turns at every corner. I'll talk about 1 and or 2 now because they aren't the main focus of Persona 5 that I want to talk about. The first traitor you encounter, and by encounter I mean first interact with, is Igor, which is a really interesting choice because if you're familiar with the Persona games, you deal with Igor in every one of those other games. He is someone who is supposed to guide you and be your true kind of voice and like what you should be doing in the games, and you should be following his kind of guidance or the path he's sort of set you on. In Persona 5, it turns out he is ultimately the big bad in the vanilla version of Persona 5, and he had just been playing you as a puppet, much like some other characters in the game. It's an interesting turn and one you only really notice if you pay attention enough. Igor's voice is different than the one you're accustomed to in all the other Persona games, and when you hear him in Persona 5, it's a different voice. You might just bank that in the back of your mind as something weird, but voice actors change. It's not really that bizarre that the voice actor would change all of a sudden. It might catch you by surprise, and naturally so, because Igor is someone you're supposed to intuitively trust because he's the one that's helping you get stronger with the use of personas. In Persona 5 Royal, we interact with a new character. Actually, we interact with multiple new characters, but the one I want to focus on is Takuro Muruki. He shows up after the first dungeon of the game and acts as the school's temporary psychiatrist. And one thing you might have noted if you played Persona 5 and then Persona 5 Royal is that you probably didn't trust this guy when you first encountered him. I mean, I sure didn't. Even when he became a confidant in the game and seemingly was well-intentioned in helping you kind of push through the very traumatic stuff that's been happening, I still said, I don't trust this guy. This guy's fishy. And I was right. He takes the protagonist's trust and uses it to fulfill his own goal. Now, I feel very weird calling Maruki a traitor. He does this because he wants everyone to live their most perfect life, whether it be having an alive father again, having never hurt their leg, having an alive mom instead of a dead one, being a real person, not having a friend jump off a building, having a repaired relationship with your father, or having the perfect teacher that you can happily idolize. This was done through the use of his persona and blending the metaverse with the real world. Metaverse being the place where you have your powers with personas and you're kind of a little bit superhuman in a sense. This is sort of how vanilla Persona 5 ended, with the metaverse sort of bleeding into the real world. His intentions aren't bad, though his methods are suspect. He uses his position as a therapist to learn of everyone's deep-seated desires and why they're actually miserable, and uses that info to sort of give them their perfect life through the use of his persona. But now isn't the time to talk about why Takuda Maruki is a bad therapist. I would like to turn my focus on the third traitor of the Persona 5 games. Meet Goro Akechi, the world's greatest detective, or at least in his own eyes. He is sort of following the footsteps of the other great child detective in the Persona series, not Detective Conan. He has solved multiple cases about mental shutdowns happening, causing multiple disturbances in everyone's daily life. He was able to find out that the cause of these mental shutdowns was enabled by the employers of these people having stressed them out or whatever means to cause people to have a mental shutdown. And how he got his name out there was, it wasn't just like one McDonald's or like a bookstore. It was like big, high-ranking government officials that he was taking down with these allegations. At the start of the game, someone that gets taken down is the head of transportation in Tokyo. Akechi acts as a foil to the Phantom Thieves, or whatever you happen to name your group of do-gooders. Once you start taking down multiple targets, your name starts getting out there and more in the public eye, and the debate of whether or not what you're doing is legal becomes a hot button topic within media. Essentially what you're doing, so we're all on the same page here, is that you're making shitheads not shitheads anymore by going into the metaverse to manipulate their subconscious or cognitive sense of self, saying, hey, stop being a shithead. And they're like, wow, you've beaten me. I'm going to go back to regular me and not be a shithead anymore. More on this later. Akechi is the most critical of your actions and says as much, and anytime he's in any TV show, he's specifically saying what the Phantom Thieves are doing is real bad. He questions your methods about how you get the victims to change their hearts and actually admit to the horrendous things that they're doing. And whenever he interacts with you, the protagonist, it's almost always contentious because you're almost always butting heads on what you see as right and wrong. He's not dumb. He's suspicious of you from the start. Like I said, he's not wrong, but fuck him. Your relationship with Akechi culminates into him blackmailing you, forcing his way into your little group. Obviously, as stated, he's the third traitor in this game, so he's here to be actively deceitful to you. Of course it is. It's all a ruse just so you can get arrested at the climax of the game, or supposed climax of the game. This actually follows a common trope in the Sentai series, or as we know them in the United States, or everywhere else in the world, Power Rangers. As we know in Power Rangers, there's usually a sixth member of the group that sort of shows up at some point, and sometimes they're antagonistic to the group, and then they're like, I guess I'll join you. Other times they're like, I'm gonna join you. Ha ha ha, gotcha. But ha ha ha, you got me, and now I'm on your team. And what's most notable about these sixth Rangers is that their silhouette of their costume doesn't match the other Rangers. There's usually some sort of extra aspect that makes their costume unique or more special in some cases. This is shown in-game, where in Royal you can actually dress up as the in-universe Sentai group Phoenix Ranger Featherman are. Akechi follows the styling of the typical Sixth Ranger outfit that is noticeably more stylized than your own. Though I don't know how the Phantom Thieves are operating in an illegal sense, as they are doing their deeds in a space that isn't or shouldn't be governed by regular human laws, because there are demons there. And seemingly with Akechi betraying you and you being arrested and interrogated, this would lead to him assassinating you and thus ending your chance of being a good boy. But here's a Ted fun fact. Akechi's a bad detective. As I said, Akechi's claim to fame as a detective was solving high-profile cases with incredibly damning evidence. And this is all because Akechi set up everything to happen, sort of a little bit. Akechi made these crimes possible with the use of the metaverse. The metaverse is sort of like it's like a cognitive place in which your deepest heart's desires come out, and it warps certain places and your view of that area for what you think it is, I guess. But a select few regular people can actually go into the metaverse and affect it in some way or manner. There's also mementos, which is sort of like a shared cognitive space that everyone is a part of in a sense. We first hear about the effects that the metaverse can have early on in the game when we see a subway get derailed by someone having a supposed mental breakdown. The Phantom Thieves, or whatever you called your group, would use the metaverse to get shitheads to admit to the crimes they've committed. These crimes would range from a drug lord who is using high school students to move product, a capitalist pig who ignores safety regulations on food products and forces his laborers to work overtime for no pay, to a famous artist who pretends to take young artists in and then just goes ahead and steals their work for his own. Also, there's this one piece of shit. He's the first dude you deal with at your school that I can't say what he does. If I say these words in a very specific order, I might get banned from YouTube. What Akechi did was the opposite. He would go into the metaverse and then straight up kill that person's metaverse counterpart, which would then in turn cause that person to have a real life mental shutdown or cause a rampage, depending on what translation you're using of the game. Then once the rampage would happen, Akechi would come out acting the hero saying, I got evidence saying that the government that is opposing this guy I like is causing these problems. So we got to take them down and get my guy elected. Nowadays, what Akechi's doing isn't so bad. I agree with him in a sense that the government's broken. We got to get the other guy in. Well, no, wait. But enough about the story of the game and its mechanics. There's a lot more to get into. The game rules and you should play it despite me effectively ruining it for you. I want to talk about how Akechi eventually sucks as a detective. And I know what I just said makes him a fraud and not a real detective. That's not what's important, because you realize all of this far sooner than anything else that happens in the game when you learn more about him. That is only the case if you were in fact paying attention, and it's kind of hard not to notice this happen. Once you defeat the second boss in the game, he reveals that there is another metaverse user, a man in a black mask who goes around straight up killing people. You are now worried about this other metaverse user, but with no leads on the matter, you can't really handle it because you have no idea who it is. This is something you put in the back of your mind, and then shortly after the second dungeon, you take a school trip to a TV studio to learn about how TV is made. While at the TV station, your friends, your pet cat, and yourself have a conversation about getting some pancakes. Or that the Tokyo Dome or something to that effect looks like some pancakes. Akechi arrives at the scene, inserting himself into the conversation, seemingly because he sees you in school uniforms, and makes a comment on how you're about to get some delicious cake. He goes on to say that he missed lunch and is also quite hungry himself and could go for some delicious pancakes. Now, 9 out of 10 times, this is a whatever conversation, someone being nice and entering themselves into their conversation, whether asked to or not. He's just being friendly with kids his own age, seemingly wanting friends. The thing about this whole interaction is it's suspect to begin with. Because the thing is, no human, your friends, nor yourself mentioned anything about pancakes. It's something even stated as much by the idiot of the group, Sakamoto, who says, we didn't say anything about pancakes. Akechi is so positive that he heard the word pancake said by someone. Someone must have said pancake. Here's the thing, Akechi isn't wrong. Someone did say the word pancake at some point in our conversation. It was by our pet cat, Morgana. Morgana is a cat or being from the metaverse who just happens to look like a cartoon cat. And once they exit the metaverse, they take on the appearance of a real cat. What makes Morgana special is that he can talk. He's a talking cat. But only people that have been to the metaverse can understand what Morgana is saying. This is really a big, long way of getting to a question. How could Akechi understand a cat that's not from this world? Obviously, in a means to not be suspenseful in any way, shape, or form, this is all because Akechi's that other metaverse user causing people to go crazy. It's not really as revealing as I write it. Now, seeing it in my script, it's not as revealing and not that much a surprise because of how I structured my essay here, but, it's just more proof that he's pretty not great as a detective. Actually, this whole pancake moment we had means little in the immediate. It's not something we actually reference to at any other point for the rest of the game. It's also something you'd probably gloss over. Maybe you sped through the dialogue fast and you're like, oh, maybe someone did talk about pancakes. I don't remember. And then we're in with the next interaction with Akechi when he's talking about how the Phantom Thieves drool, he rules, he's number one, don't trust them Phantom Thieves. You then debate him during the appearance on the TV show, saying, hey, I think the Phantom Thieves are pretty alright. This sordid love affair goes on for like 3/4 of the game, culminating to Akechi forcing his way into your group because he believes that this will help him understand why you're doing this. Honestly, it's no surprise that Akechi betrays us at the end of the day. I mean, Persona 4 taught us not to trust cops. Akechi's essentially a cop in this sense. Akechi thinks he's so smart, playing with rigged dice sets and chutes and ladders. We're always getting chutes and he's getting ladders and ladders, going up and up and up. He thinks this whole undercover stunt he's cooked up is working perfectly, and nothing can stop him. And honestly, being undercover is something any good detective should be good at, because they can't get ID'd as a cop. And what it turns out is that Akechi's own arrogance turns out to be his own downfall, but that's something more present in the media. And in real life, those people tend to fall up. Weird. It's hilarious that Akechi's entire cover is blown months and months and months before he even thinks about starting his plan. Over a comment he heard and should not have understood, but did. Even more so, he's dumb enough to comment on it, saying, whoa, you guys are talking about pancakes. So sure of himself that he heard the word pancakes and he thought, hey, I should be a little playful and reference a conversation I was eavesdropping on with kids my own age. Something I really shouldn't be injecting myself into, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm Akechi Goro. I have no friends. And was that at that moment his whole life was ruined because of one innocuous comment about pancakes. It blows up in his face. I guess breakfast really isn't an anytime meal. It's hilarious that his cover gets blown immediately. He has no idea, still arrogant enough to think he's a genius, and gets got because of it. The genius detective then, by everyone in our world, the regular world, starts calling him the pancake-loving detective, and his reputation is ruined. Get bent, you pig. It's great storytelling on Atlas's part, because in the moment, it seems like such a throwaway line. You place it in your back of your head, and probably something you're not even going to think about later on down the road. Akechi is an incredibly complex character, and I give the writers credit for making him so. And they go through great lengths to try to make him sympathetic in your eyes through the ending of the game. He is a character who, in many aspects of his life, is unwanted. His father abandoned his pregnant mother. His mother is a whore, so she really has no time to spend with him. He doesn't really have friends his own age because he's on his plot of revenge against his own father that he can't make real connections with kids his age, which is makes the connection with you so much more important to him. He is in fact a tool for a man who is in fact his own father. He knows this and is going to use whatever he can to take him down once he gets to the top of where he wants to go. But his own father is there to beat him one step ahead and kill him before he can do anything else because his usefulness to him has reached its end. Akechi gets killed by his own father's cognitive representation of Akechi himself. And from that point on to the end of the Persona 5 Royal content, the writers try very hard to make you realize what Akechi really is, or what he's supposed to represent in the grand scheme of things. He is a product of a world that casts aside inconveniences and props up those that have use to people up until they have served that purpose. He's a kid with a ton of issues just because of the environment he lives in. In Persona 5, Akechi meets his untimely end. We don't see him anymore at the end of the game. That's all we see of him. But in Royal, it turns out Akechi might not have died. And at the main story of Persona 5, once we get into Royal, he turns himself in saying that he was all the cause of it and that you, the protagonist, don't have to go to jail, which is how the game ended in vanilla Persona 5. The reason Akechi is even alive in this portion of the game is that Maruki, the villain of the Persona 5 Royal content, felt bad for you. He felt bad because he thought you and Akechi were one and the same and could have had a real friendship. If none of this Persona stuff happened, he could have seen yourself as kindred spirits in a sense. He might even consider your relationship with Akechi so similar to that of his own love that he had to let go because of circumstances that he couldn't control. Which I guess that makes the protagonist and Akechi pairing the canonical pairing. And as we fight our way through this story during Persona 5 Royal, we sort of get to understand Akechi a little bit more in this weird, bizarre second lease on life he has. And he's willing to die for it. Quite literally in the sense, he understands that he is just a being of this cognitive world and he shouldn't, in fact, be there. He's fighting for a real world because he doesn't want to be in one in which he's just a puppet for a man making everyone happy. And if that means taking him down and reverting everything to how it was before, meaning he's not alive anymore, it's something he's willing to follow through on because he knows at the end of the day it's right. That's really the point in which you start to really see Akechi in a different light. Though he's still as manic and insane as he was when you see him in the palace as his alter ego, but you understand that he's still willing to die for, in fact, what is the right thing because he wants to do what's right for once after doing so many bad things. I don't know if they do a good job, or even in my eyes, he succeeds in redeeming himself. He's a very flawed character. At the end of the day, he's still a cop. He's still a detective working for the police. At the end of the day, Akechi is a truly tragic character. He's a shit of a detective, but he tries really hard to make it up to you, trying to just make things right one more time, even if that means he'll be dead. This took a turn for what was supposed to be a funny video about a man who got owned by some pancakes.